Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and today we're going to talk about the pros and cons of an offer review date. All right, so this video is directed towards sellers, people that have a house to sell, and I live in Seattle, Washington, and help people buy and sell real estate here. So this video is going to be more applicable to somebody in the Seattle market, but I think it applies to anybody in any market that is competitive and has more buyers than sellers. So in the Seattle real estate market right now, we have very few houses on the market, and we have a lot more buyers for these houses than there are houses. So what ultimately happens is we have a lot of competition for the same houses. In this situation, there's a legitimate need for discussion about offer review dates. Traditionally, when you put a house up for sale, you decide on a list price and you put it on the market, and when somebody brings a good offer, an offer that meets the asking price and the terms the seller's looking for, that's an offer that you want to accept right away. In Seattle and other competitive markets, you don't necessarily want to take the first offer because you might have somebody that comes and looks at it right away and just loves it, and it's 12 hours in. But there are 40 other people that want to buy a house just like this one, and there aren't any other ones to buy. And so if you can artificially delay the time and allow more people to see the house, you can potentially get a lot more money for the house and better terms. So what is an offer review date? An offer review date is essentially a date that you pick in the future. It's artificial, but you decide on this date ahead of time, usually around a week, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little longer, depending on the needs of the seller and the timing. But this is the date that you are going to be looking at offers. So it allows buyers to do their own due diligence up front, to all get the opportunity to see the house. Usually within a week, buyers are able to get into the house with their agent, tour it, and do any necessary due diligence that they want prior to making their offer, which means as a seller that you potentially have better and more offers coming in. An offer review date sounds great, doesn't it? Well, there are a few risks associated with it, so I think it's important for us to talk about those risks, and we can also talk a little bit about the benefits as well. Some of the risks of an offer review date include, number one, a lower price. Often in order to incentivize lots of people to come in and create the buyer frenzy that you're going for, you need to price a little bit lower or on the lower side of the value range. Now, when I advise clients on price, I always give a value range. There's a high end and a low end, and you want to be somewhere in between those. And depending on how quickly you want to sell and your timeline would decide where you end up on that range. In the offer review scenario, typically you price on the lower side of the range to hopefully incite a little bit of a frenzy about your house. And if you don't get multiple offers on your house at this lower price, you're now essentially committing yourself to the low price versus setting the anchor up higher. Another risk is that there are fewer potential buyers interested in purchasing your house because of the offer review date. Some buyers are completely opposed to competing over the price or the terms, so they'll just completely cross themselves off. They might even see the house, but decide, oh, if there's another offer, I don't want to make it. I've even talked buyers as the seller's agent, the buyer's agent, into getting their client to write an offer because it was better for my client and it might have caused the competition to drive the price up a little more. But there's definitely a resistance from some to enter their name into the hat and to compete. Another risk is the competition out there. There are other houses competing for buyers' attention, and maybe another house doesn't have an offer review, and sometimes other houses do have offer review dates and they are on the same day. And that is number 4, simultaneous offer review dates. If you are trying to be competitive on multiple houses at the same time and you have to pick, you're going to pick your favorite. Whereas maybe if you didn't have an offer review date, that house would already be crossed off the list for that buyer and they'd be more competitive or interested in yours. So when you have simultaneous offer review dates, sometimes buyers have to choose versus pursuing the house that they're most interested in at the moment. And that brings us to number 5. These are all pretty tied together. And number 5 is time. Have you ever been really excited about something in the moment, but 3-4 days later, you're not as excited about it? And that happens with houses too. And so it's really important sometimes for buyers to purchase when they're excited versus waiting, sleeping on it for multiple days, and then maybe deciding against it. Now, I do have a counterpoint to this. If a buyer isn't going to be interested in 3 days and they're going to be doing an inspection or something like that after they're under contract, you don't really want that buyer under contract anyway. So I don't think this one's as big of a risk, but time still is one of those things that can work against you on offer review dates. Here are a few of the benefits of an offer review date. Number 1, multiple offers. Who doesn't like a little bit of competition, especially if you're a seller? So what happens with the offer review date is you are allowing more time for buyers to get into the house and do due diligence, which typically lends itself in a competitive situation to multiple offers. So if you have a good house and multiple buyers like it, multiple buyers are able to submit an offer. Number 2, and this goes right along with multiple offers, if you have multiple offers and competition, typically the price goes up. So number 2 is a higher price. And who doesn't want a higher price for their house, right? I mean, all things considered, if you can get a higher price for it, you want to get a higher price for it. Number 3, fewer contingencies. Contingencies in the contract are opportunities for the buyer to back out of the transaction. And as a seller, you want to see the fewest number of contingencies on your house. So if there's an offer review date, typically buyers will do more of their due diligence up front and maybe cross off some contingencies and possibly even cross off other ones just to make their offer more competitive and to stand out from the crowd. A few common contingencies include inspections, which are an opportunity for buyers to back out, and also financing and appraisal. And a lot of times in competitive situations, a buyer will sometimes cross off both of those before making their offer in an attempt to be as competitive as possible. Last but not least, if you have an offer review date, you can sometimes get better terms. Again, when we have competition, people are trying to set themselves apart. And they can set themselves apart on price, which we've talked about. They can set themselves apart based on their contingencies, but they can also set themselves apart based on the terms in the contract. And this could include the closing date or the amount of earnest money that they're offering. It could include potentially renting it back to you for a little bit so you have time to find your next house. There are multiple other terms that could fall into this bucket, but the ultimate goal is to have the best terms possible for you in the contract. All right, so we've talked about the pros and cons, or the risks and benefits of an offer review date, but I need to say this. Multiple offers are not guaranteed. And this is something I tell every single seller when we're talking about price and we're talking about listing strategy. It depends on lots of factors. It depends on the house. It depends on the updates and the condition of the house, the buyers that are looking that week, the market, the interest rates that week. There are so many different factors that play into it. So an offer review date doesn't always make sense, but it can make sense. And I think it's highly important to think through these different pros and cons before deciding on a review date. I hope you found this video helpful thinking about the offer review date and some of the strategies that go into it. If you made it to the end, please consider subscribing to my channel so you can see other videos like this one. And if you know somebody who could benefit from it, please share it with them.